in the back. I'm not a sky cap. Hands ready, yo, boy. Yeah. Do it again. Like this.
Accept the case.
Passionate about finding your daughter.
Which one of y'all kicked me?
From New Life, the fastest hands in the East.
Wow.
Meet the biggest mouth in the...
I've had it. Did you hear what I just said? Get the hell out of here. Some more in the building.
A complete analysis of Rush Hour, 1998, the buddy cop phenomenon that bridged cultures, analyses and explanations. This is a complete analysis and explanation of the film Rush Hour, 1998. Released on September 18, 1998, Rush Hour arrived at a pivotal moment in action comedy cinema. Directed by Brett Ratner and starring Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, the film became an unexpected cultural milestone, not just for its box office success, but for what it represented: the successful fusion of Hong Kong martial arts cinema with Hollywood buddy cop conventions, and the unlikely pairing that would define a franchise. Drawing from critical analyses, box office data, and retrospective evaluations from sources including Roger Ebert, Rotten Tomatoes, and industry retrospectives, this analysis provides a comprehensive examination of the film's production, themes, cultural impact, and lasting legacy. Released on September 18, 1998, Rush Hour arrived at a pivotal moment in action comedy cinema. Directed by Brett Ratner and starring Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, the film became an unexpected cultural milestone, not just for its box office success, but for what it represented: the successful fusion of Hong Kong martial arts cinema with Hollywood buddy cop conventions, and the unlikely pairing that would define a franchise. Drawing from critical analyses, box office data, and retrospective evaluations from sources including Roger Ebert, Rotten Tomatoes, and industry retrospectives, this analysis provides a comprehensive examination of the film's production, themes, cultural impact, and lasting legacy. The production context and development of Rush Hour began with a spec script written in 1995 by Ross Lamanna, who envisioned a classic Unlikely Partners narrative. The project initially found a home at Hollywood Pictures, a Disney division, with Arthur Sarkisian attached as producer. However, Disney ultimately balked at the $33 to $35 million budget and expressed concerns about Jackie Chan's marketability to American audiences. At the time, Martin Lawrence was reportedly connected to the project, which would have created a very different dynamic. The film's fate changed when New Line Cinema stepped in, demonstrating the importance of studio faith in unconventional pairings. Director Brett Ratner played a crucial role in bringing Rush Hour to life. Ratner, who had just made money talks with Chris Tucker, was confident in the project. He flew to South Africa, where Chan was filming Who Am I?, to personally pitch the concept. Ratner's vision was clear and, for the film's eventual success, essential. He wanted Jackie Chan not as a supporting player or co-star in a supporting role, but as an equal partner alongside an American star. Chan agreed days later, and Tucker soon joined, marking the beginning of one of cinema's most memorable on-screen partnerships. This commitment to parity between the leads distinguished the project from earlier attempts to bring Chan to Hollywood. The financial context of Rush Hour positioned it as a moderate investment by Hollywood standards with a production budget of approximately $33 to $35 million. The film's financial performance would ultimately validate the gamble in spectacular fashion. In the United States and Canada, the film grossed $141,186,864, while international markets contributed $103,200,000, bringing the worldwide total to $244,386,864. The film debuted at number 1 in its opening weekend, grossing $33 million, an impressive return that signaled the audience's appetite for this particular pairing. For context, Rush Hour became Jackie Chan's first film to surpass $100 million at the American box office, establishing him as a genuine Hollywood star after decades of work in Hong Kong cinema. The critical reception of Rush Hour was notably divided between those who embraced its formulaic charm and those who found it lacking compared to Chan's Hong Kong work. The aggregate scores tell a story of moderate success. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 62% certified fresh rating based on 65 reviews. Metacritic assigned a score of 60 out of 100 indicating mixed or average reviews, and Allociné showed a spectator rating of 3.4 out of 5 with 1,245,904 admissions in France. This division in critical opinion reflects the film's dual nature, as both a crowd pleaser and a work that left some cinephiles wanting more. Roger Ebert's influential review championed Rush Hour while recognizing its formulaic nature. In his review for the Chicago Sun-Times, Ebert coined the term "one's a movie" to describe the familiar trope. One's a legendary detective from Hong Kong, and one's a Los Angeles cop. And one's a Chinese guy, and one's a black guy. And one's a martial arts expert, and one's a wisecracking showboat. Neither one's a original casting idea, but together, they make an entertaining team. Ebert praised the chemistry between the leads and noted Chan's stunt work, though he observed that the end-credit outtakes focused more on flubbed lines than on the bone-crunching stunt failures that characterized Chan's Hong Kong films, signaling a deliberate shift in presentation for American audiences. James Berardinelli of Real Views offered a pointed critique, arguing that Rush Hour failed to utilize Chan's full range of skills. Berardinelli wrote, "In his Hong Kong features, Chan almost always delights, because he is given an opportunity to display his versatility. His performances aren't just about action. They're as much about comic timing as they are about stunts." Unfortunately, filmmaker Brett Ratner doesn't seem to understand a large part of Chan's appeal. Berardinelli also found Chris Tucker's performance irritating, comparing his high-energy delivery to fingernails on a blackboard. This perspective represents the critical camp that viewed the film as a compromise of Chan's unique talents. Major publications offered more balanced approaches to Rush Hour. Variety's Joe Layden called the film raucously entertaining, while Janet Maslin of the New York Times described it as a kick-happy buddy film. The Los Angeles Times' Kevin Thomas noted that the film effectively teams Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in a formulaic but funny action comedy that should please fans of both stars. These reviews recognized that while the film might not be revolutionary, it succeeded in its primary goal of entertainment through its lead pairing. The French critical reception offered more nuanced perspectives given France's long familiarity with Chan's Hong Kong work through the Police Story series and other imports. Allociné's aggregate score of 3.4 out of 5 reflects generally positive reception, though individual reviews reveal the same tensions present in American criticism. One reviewer noted, "Rush Hour, without being unpleasant to watch, offers very little in its genre, but has an asset in Jackie Chan who, as always, delivers in the action scenes." Another observed, "An ingenious idea to bring together a black man and a Chinese man in a Lethal Weapon universe." pleasurable. These comments show the film's cross-cultural appeal while acknowledging its limitations. The narrative structure of Rush Hour adheres faithfully to the buddy cop template established by films like Lethal Weapon, 1987, and 48 Hours, 1982. The narrative follows a predictable but effective arc that begins with the inciting incident. In Hong Kong during the final days of British colonial rule, Inspector Lee disrupts a smuggling operation led by crime lord Hun Tao, played by Tom Wilkinson. 2 years later, the kidnapping occurs when Hun Tao's operatives take Su Young, the 11-year-old daughter of Consul Han, now stationed in Los Angeles. The forced partnership follows when Consul Han requests Lee's assistance, but the FBI assigns LAPD Detective James Carter to babysit Lee, effectively keeping both cops occupied while the Bureau handles the investigation. The narrative arc of Rush Hour includes an important unmasking sequence. When Carter discovers he's been used as a distraction, his pride is wounded, and he decides to solve the case himself with Lee's help. The two begin operating independently, leading to the climax in a museum showdown where the duo rescues Su Young and confronts the villains. This structure follows the classic buddy cop formula, but allows for the specific cultural dynamic between the leads to drive much of the entertainment value. Cultural difference serves as the primary comedic engine of Rush Hour. The film derives much of its humor from the cultural and linguistic gap between its protagonists. Chansley is characterized by restraint, discipline, and cultural authenticity, while Tucker's Carter is loud, improvisational, and quintessentially American. As Roger Ebert noted, Chan is not known for his effortless command of English, and Tucker is a motormouth. Chan's persona is modest and self-effacing, and Tucker plays a shameless self-promoter. This contrast creates the central tension that drives both comedy and character development throughout the film. Key sequences deploy cultural contrast effectively in Rush Hour. The airport arrival sequence features Carter's rapid-fire English confusing Lee, who actually understands more than he lets on, establishing the language barrier as a source of comedy. The war scene presents a memorable moment where both characters lip-sync to Edwin Starr's anti-war anthem, finding common ground through music despite their differences. The restaurant scene shows Lee offering Carter authentic Chinese food, with Carter's reaction playing on stereotypes about unfamiliar cuisine, while also creating a moment of genuine character interaction. Critical concerns about Rush Hour's treatment of cultural difference have been raised, with some finding it reductive. One Rotten Tomatoes user wrote, "While this formulaic bit of buddy cop comedy kinda works, it kinda works on the back of Chris Tucker's black man playing blackface for the modern day. Ghetto riffing, which is practically nonstop throughout the piece." This criticism highlights the complicated racial politics of the film, which was released at a time when such characterizations were more readily accepted in mainstream Hollywood comedies. Rush Hour subverts genre expectations in significant ways. Where Lethal Weapon presents both Riggs and Murtaugh as competent action heroes, in Rush Hour the action burden falls almost exclusively on Chan Tucker's Carter is notably less capable in combat, often needing rescue from Chan's character. This inversion, the Asian character as the physical protector, the black character as the comic relief, represented a departure from Hollywood conventions, though it also reinforced other stereotypes about Asian masculinity and black comedic roles. The treatment of the kidnapped girl Su Young in Rush Hour offers another subversive element. Rather than being a passive victim, she's established as one of Lee's martial arts students, with Lee asking her, "Have you been practicing your eye gouges?" This characterization gives her agency and establishes her relationship with Lee beyond mere rescue object. Throughout the film, she actively resists her captors, making her a more dimensional character than typically found in such narratives and reinforcing Lee's role as both protector and mentor. Jackie Chan's performance in Rush Hour represents a careful negotiation between his established Hong Kong persona and Hollywood's expectations. In films like Police Story, 1985, and Project A, 1983, Chan combined death-defying stunts with physical comedy and boyish charm. For Rush Hour, he was required to perform primarily as the straight man, a role reversal that some critics found limiting. This adaptation of Chan's persona represented both a compromise for the Hollywood market and an introduction of his talents to audiences who had not followed his Hong Kong career. Chan himself expressed disappointment with the final product of Rush Hour. In a later interview, he stated, "When we finished filming, I felt very disappointed because it wasn't a movie I liked and I didn't want the action scenes involved. I felt that the action style was very Americanized, and I didn't understand American humor. This admission from Chan himself provides crucial context for understanding the film's place in his filmography. Despite his reservations, Rush Hour became his most financially successful American film and defined his Hollywood career for many viewers. The notable stunts in Rush Hour showcase Chan's abilities even in what he considered an Americanized context. A sequence where he leaps from a double-decker bus to an overhead traffic sign to a moving truck demonstrates his characteristic willingness to perform dangerous maneuvers. A scene in a high atrium where he falls from a beam and slides to safety down a silk streamer displays his inventive use of environment. The climactic fight sequence protecting ancient Chinese artifacts provides a setting that connects his martial arts prowess to cultural heritage themes. Roger Ebert was careful to note the nature of Chan's stunt work in Rush Hour, writing, "Although Chan does his own stunts, they are indeed stunts and not death-defying risks. He does what a stuntman would do, but with the same safeguards and deceptive camera angles. He is brave, agile, and inventive, but not foolish." This observation highlights the difference between Chan's Hollywood work and his Hong Kong films, where the outtakes often showed genuine injuries and near-death experiences. Chris Tucker arrived at Rush Hour with a growing reputation from Friday, 1995, The Fifth Element, 1997, and Money Talks, 1997. His performance as James Carter draws heavily on his stand-up comedy background, rapid-fire delivery, a piercing voice, and physical expressiveness. The character of Carter represents a specific archetype that Tucker had developed throughout his early career, and Rush Hour provided the widest audience yet for this persona. Critics remain divided on Tucker's effectiveness in Rush Hour. His defenders praise his comedic timing and energy, finding his motor-mouth delivery perfectly suited to the buddy cop format. His detractors find his performance grating, with the Entertainment Weekly review being particularly harsh. Tucker's sole focus, a la Groucho Marx, is on what's directly in front of him, and that attitude only reinforces the crudiness of a vehicle like Rush Hour. This division reflects broader debates about high-energy comedic performances in action films. What's undeniable in Rush Hour is the chemistry between the two leads. As the Rotten Tomatoes retrospective noted, it's no secret that Chan has previously explained he wasn't a huge fan of Rush Hour partially because he didn't quite get the humor. But that doesn't mean he didn't have great chemistry with Tucker, and Chan himself has talked about the bond that formed between them. This off-screen relationship translated into on-screen authenticity that became the franchise's primary selling point. The supporting cast of Rush Hour brings dimension to familiar archetypes. Tom Wilkinson as Griffin, also known as Hun Tao, brings unexpected gravitas to the villain role, elevating what could have been a generic antagonist. Ken Leung as Sang provides a menacing young gangster who serves as the primary physical antagonist, creating credible threats for Chan's character. Elizabeth Pena as Tanya Johnson offers a Secret Service agent who aids the investigation, while Julia Su as Su Young brings genuine presence to a role that could have been purely functional. Rush Hour arrived at a specific cultural moment regarding race and representation. The film represented the first major Hollywood production to pair a black detective with an Asian lead, a casting choice that remains relatively rare in American cinema. As the Rotten Tomatoes retrospective noted, it was, however, the first, and so far the only, time we saw a black detective team up with an Asian one, and Chan's role remains one of the highest-profile primary Asian leads in a major Hollywood film franchise. The film's approach to race remains complicated. Tucker's performance leans heavily on stereotypes about black masculinity, loudness, street wisdom, obsession with material goods, that some critics found troubling. One reviewer wrote, "It's embarrassing as hell that Hollywood still plays this card, and that black guys still need to play it to get work." Conversely, Chan's character represents a different kind of stereotype. The martial arts master who is reserved, culturally pure, and slightly naive about American ways. The film attempts to balance these portrayals by giving both characters moments of genuine competence and vulnerability. The Hong Kong handover context adds geopolitical dimension to Rush Hour. The film's prologue is set in Hong Kong during the final days of British colonial rule, a deliberate choice that situates the narrative within a specific geopolitical moment. The smuggling plot involves the theft of Chinese cultural artifacts, referencing real anxieties about cultural heritage during the transition. One Allociné reviewer noted, "Despite an evocation of the theft of ancient Chinese properties by Anglophones, This political theme remains in the background of a pure action comedy promoting openness of mind and cultural curiosity. The end credits bloopers tradition, a distinctive element of Jackie Chan's Hong Kong films, appears in Rush Hour with a notable shift. Chan's Hong Kong films included outtakes demonstrating the authenticity of the stunts, often showing injuries and near misses that humanized the performers and left audiences with a sense of wonder at the risks taken. Rush Hour continues this tradition but emphasizes comedic mistakes, flubbed lines, and improvised moments between Chan and Tucker, rather than stunt failures. For longtime Chan fans, this represented a softening of the brand. For American audiences, it was an introduction to a charming convention. Rush Hour was an unambiguous commercial success, ranking 7th among highest-grossing films of 1998 in the United States. With a budget of $33 million and a worldwide gross of $244 million, the film achieved a profitability ratio of approximately 7.4 times its budget. This financial performance validated New Line Cinema's faith in the project and established a template for future cross-cultural action comedies. The success of Rush Hour spawned 2 sequels. Rush Hour 2, 2001, grossed $347 million worldwide with a 52% Rotten Tomatoes score, while Rush Hour 3, 2007, grossed $258 million with a 19% score. The declining critical reception, particularly the 19% Rotten Tomatoes score for the third installment, reflects diminishing returns on the formula. However, the franchise's total worldwide gross of nearly $850 million against a combined budget of approximately $263 million made it one of the most profitable action comedy series of its era. Rush Hour accomplished what earlier Hollywood attempts like The Big Brawl and The Protector could not. It made Jackie Chan a genuine American star. Following Rumble in the Bronx, 1996, American audiences were primed for Chan's particular blend of action and comedy, but Rush Hour provided the perfect vehicle for crossover success. Chan would go on to star in Shanghai Noon, 2000, Shanghai Nights, 2003, and numerous other Hollywood productions, though none quite captured the chemistry of his pairing with Tucker. Rush Hour became the defining role of Chris Tucker's career. Though he appeared in Silver Linings Playbook, 2012, and other films, Tucker's output decreased significantly after the franchise. He was reportedly paid $20 million for Rush Hour 3, a testament to his value to the property. The franchise's success allowed Tucker to command top-tier salaries while also limiting his career trajectory by typecasting him in the Motormouth persona. In a charming piece of Hollywood trivia, Rush Hour is indirectly responsible for the existence of Rotten Tomatoes. Site creator Sen Duong, a longtime Jackie Chan fan, conceived the idea for the review aggregator while trying to find reviews of Chan's Hong Kong films. He launched the site in August 1998, timed to coincide with the release of Rush Hour, though the film was ultimately pushed to September. As the Rotten Tomatoes retrospective noted, "Would it all have happened anyway, even if Rush Hour hadn't been made? We'll never know, but we're pretty happy with the way things turned out." In recent years, Rush Hour has received new attention and new scrutiny. In 2025, streaming versions of the film began displaying a content warning about offensive humor, reflecting changing sensibilities around racial stereotypes and the type of comedy that was mainstream in the late 1990s. This contemporary reassessment places the film within ongoing conversations about representation in Hollywood and the legacy of racial humor in popular culture. The Guardian's retrospective praised the film's pure joy, with writer Tammy Tarn recalling, "To 10-year-old me, who sang about heartbreak and desire with similar vigor in front of her immigrant parents, it was a quintessentially American moment." This personal reflection captures the film's significance for audiences who saw themselves represented in the unlikely pairing and found validation in seeing an Asian lead share top billing in a Hollywood blockbuster. The strengths of Rush Hour center on lead chemistry above all else. The Chan-Tucker pairing creates genuine entertainment value that compensates for narrative shortcomings. The action choreography, while Americanized by Chan's standards, remains superior to typical Hollywood action films of the era. The pacing moves briskly and maintains energy throughout, while the supporting cast brings dimension to familiar archetypes. The weaknesses of Rush Hour are equally apparent. The formulaic structure offers few surprises and follows predictable beats established by earlier buddy cop films. The stereotypical humor deploys both leads in ways that reinforce cultural stereotypes rather than subverting them. Chan's full range, particularly his physical comedy skills, was constrained by the Hollywood framework. The generic villain, despite Tom Wilkinson's competent performance, lacks memorable characteristics that would elevate the conflict. Rush Hour succeeds precisely where it needed to, in the relationship between its leads. As one Allociné reviewer summarized, a distracting popcorn movie and very rhythmic. Or, in Roger Ebert's more elegant formulation, it's lightweight and made out of familiar elements, but they're handled with humor and invention, and the One's a formula can seem fresh if the characters are bow-tie couple of engaging performers. 25 years after its release, Rush Hour occupies an interesting position in cinema history. It is neither the best buddy cop film ever made nor the worst. It is neither a groundbreaking work of art nor a cynical cash grab. Instead, it represents something rarer, a film that understood its limitations and worked within them to create something genuinely enjoyable. The film's legacy is complicated by its dated humor, its director's subsequent controversies, and the changing landscape of racial representation in Hollywood. The endurance of Rush Hour stems from the chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker that transcends the formula surrounding them. As Chan himself learned to appreciate the film's place in his career, audiences continue to discover and rediscover the joy of two wildly different people finding common ground. For a film that began with a producer's skepticism about Chan's American appeal, Rush Hour achieved something significant. It opened doors for Asian-led Hollywood productions, created one of the most memorable duos in action comedy history, and quite unexpectedly, gave the world Rotten Tomatoes. The film's approach to action choreography, while criticized by purists, established a template that influenced subsequent Hollywood action comedies. The integration of Chan's martial arts style with American staging techniques created a hybrid form that proved commercially viable. This fusion influenced films ranging from the Shanghai Noon series to the Kung Fu Panda animated films, where Chan's voice work continued his presence in American popular culture. The linguistic comedy in Rush Hour operates on multiple levels that reward repeated viewing. Chan's Li speaks English that is deliberately accented and sometimes fractured, but the character reveals increasing comprehension as the film progresses. This development mirrors the character's growing comfort with Carter and American culture. The film's humor often derives from Carter's assumption that Lee doesn't understand him, creating dramatic irony when Lee later demonstrates comprehension. The museum setting for the climax of Rush Hour carries thematic weight that enriches the action sequences. The artifacts being protected represent Chinese cultural heritage, connecting Lee's personal mission to protect Su Yung with a broader mission to preserve cultural treasures from colonial appropriation. This setting allows the film to comment indirectly on the historical context established in the prologue, while providing visually distinctive environments for the action choreography. The character of Consul Han, played by Tsi Ma, represents the immigrant experience of navigating between cultures. As a diplomat, he embodies the ideal of cultural diplomacy and representation. His trust in Lee and his fraught relationship with American law enforcement reflect real tensions about jurisdiction, sovereignty, and the treatment of foreign nationals within the American justice system. Ma's performance brings dignity to a role that could have been merely functional. Julia Su's performance as Su Yung establishes the character's agency early in Rush Hour, making her more than a typical damsel in distress. Her martial arts training with Lee, referenced in their first scene together, pays off in moments where she resists her captors. This characterization aligns with Chan's own films, where female characters often demonstrate capability and resourcefulness rather than passive victimhood. The FBI's role in Rush Hour as antagonists to the investigative process reflects a common theme in buddy cop films: distrust of institutional authority. The Bureau's decision to sideline both Lee and Carter creates the conditions for their independent investigation and eventual partnership. This structural element allows the film to critique institutional racism and bureaucratic incompetence, while positioning the individual detectives as more effective than the system designed to handle the case. The relationship between Lee and Carter evolves through specific beats in Rush Hour that establish genuine character development. Their initial mutual resentment gives way to grudging respect during the nightclub sequence, where they must work together. The bonding moment over music in the war scene provides an emotional turning point where cultural differences become sources of connection rather than division. By the film's climax, their partnership feels earned rather than merely dictated by plot requirements. The representation of Los Angeles in Rush Hour serves as more than setting. It becomes a character in the film's exploration of cultural diversity. The city's Chinatown, its nightlife districts, and its various communities provide backdrops that reflect the multicultural reality that the film's central pairing represents. Carter's knowledge of the city complements Lee's outsider perspective, making their partnership geographically as well as culturally necessary. The role of the outtakes in shaping audience reception of Rush Hour deserves specific attention. For American audiences unfamiliar with Chan's Hong Kong work, the blooper reel during the credits introduced the convention of showing behind-the-scenes moments. These sequences humanize the performers, showing the work behind the finished product and creating goodwill that extends beyond the film itself. The outtakes became a signature element of the franchise, with each sequel featuring increasingly elaborate collections of mistakes and improvisations. The financial model of Rush Hour influenced subsequent Hollywood productions featuring Asian leads. The film's success demonstrated that international appeal could compensate for perceived limitations in the domestic market. Chan's ability to draw audiences in Asia, while Tucker anchored the American demographic, created a template for cross-cultural casting that studios would attempt to replicate with varying degrees of success. The soundtrack of Rush Hour deserves mention for its role in establishing the film's tone and period identity. The use of Edwin Starr's War in the bonding scene became iconic, and the integration of hip-hop and R&B tracks throughout the film connected it to contemporary urban culture. The soundtrack's success contributed to the film's cultural footprint and helped position it within late 1990s popular culture. Brett Ratner's direction of Rush Hour has been reassessed in light of subsequent controversies surrounding the director. While the film launched his career as a commercially viable director of action comedies, Ratner's later conduct and the revelations about his behavior have complicated reappraisals of his work. This context adds another layer to the film's legacy, as contemporary viewers must separate the art from the artist when evaluating Rush Hour. The representation of masculinity in Rush Hour offers interesting contrasts between the leads. Chan's Lee embodies a masculinity based on competence, restraint, and protective instincts. Tucker's Carter represents a masculinity based on bravado, sexual conquest, and verbal dominance. The film ultimately validates aspects of both models while showing each character learning from the other. This nuanced approach to gender performance adds depth to what could have been purely superficial characterizations. The film's treatment of authority figures beyond the leads creates a world where institutional competence is consistently questioned. From the FBI's mishandling of the case to the local police department's willingness to sideline Carter, Rush Hour presents a vision of law enforcement where individual initiative matters more than following protocol. This theme resonates with the buddy cop genre's broader skepticism about bureaucracy. The visual style of Rush Hour blends Hollywood production values with Hong Kong action aesthetics. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg, who had worked on Terminator 2, Judgment Day, brings a polished look to the film while accommodating Chan's preference for wider shots that show the full scope of action sequences. This visual approach allows Chan's choreography to remain visible while maintaining Hollywood production standards. The editing rhythm of Rush Hour differs significantly from Chan's Hong Kong films. Where his earlier work featured longer takes that showcase the complexity of action sequences, Rush Hour employs faster cutting that conforms to American action conventions. This editorial choice contributed to Chan's disappointment with the film, as it obscured some of the choreographic detail that distinguished his Hong Kong work. The cultural impact of Rush Hour extended beyond film into television and other media. The franchise's success led to an animated series, discussions of a fourth film that continued for years, and numerous homages and references in other works. The film's iconic moments, particularly Carter's "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" line, entered popular culture vocabulary. The film's release in 1998 positioned it at the end of a decade that saw significant evolution in action comedy conventions. The buddy cop genre had been established in the 1980s, and Rush Hour represents a late entry that revitalized the formula through cross-cultural casting. The film's success demonstrated that the genre still had commercial vitality when executed with fresh chemistry between leads. The international reception of Rush Hour varied by market, with particularly strong performance in Asian territories where Chan's established fanbase turned out in large numbers. This international dimension of the film's success influenced Hollywood's increasing attention to global box office in subsequent years, as studios recognized the value of casting that could appeal across multiple markets. The franchise that Rush Hour launched maintained remarkable consistency in its creative team across 3 films. Brett Ratner directed all 3 installments, and Chon and Tucker remained the central focus throughout. This continuity created a unified vision across the series, while also demonstrating the limitations of a formula that showed diminishing returns with each sequel. The critical reassessment of Rush Hour in recent years reflects broader conversations about representation and cultural appropriation in Hollywood. The film's use of stereotypes, once dismissed as harmless comedy, now receives more critical examination. This reassessment does not negate the film's historical importance, but rather contextualizes it within changing standards for racial representation in popular culture. The film's legacy for Jackie Chan's career is particularly significant. Rush Hour made him a bankable Hollywood star, but it also represented a compromise of his artistic vision. The tension between commercial success and artistic integrity visible in Chan's relationship with the film mirrors broader tensions in the careers of international stars transitioning to Hollywood productions. For Chris Tucker, Rush Hour became both a career peak and a creative limitation. The success of the franchise allowed him to command enormous salaries, while also typecasting him in roles that required the same rapid-fire delivery and comedic persona. His reduced output following the franchise suggests a performer who achieved financial security, but perhaps at the cost of a more varied career. The production history of Rush Hour reveals the challenges of cross-cultural filmmaking in the 1990s. The skepticism about Chan's marketability, the concerns about the budget, and the need for a director willing to travel to South Africa to secure Chan's participation all demonstrate the barriers that existed for international stars in Hollywood. The film's success helped lower these barriers for subsequent generations of Asian performers. The museum climax of Rush Hour uses its setting to create distinctive action environments while also commenting on cultural preservation. The Chinese artifacts that serve as the backdrop for the final confrontation represent cultural heritage that Lee is positioned to protect. This thematic layer connects the action sequences to the film's broader concerns about cultural identity and respect. The character of Sang, played by Ken Leung, serves as a physical antagonist who provides credible threat for Chan's action sequences. Leung's background and physical abilities allowed for choreography that showcased Chan's skills while creating a memorable villain who could return in the sequel. Sang's menace adds stakes to the action without requiring the primary villain to engage directly in physical confrontation. The relationship between Lee and Carter in Rush Hour follows the classic structure of the odd couple partnership while adding cultural dimensions that earlier films had not explored. Their journey from enforced partnership to genuine friendship provides the emotional arc that sustains the film beyond its action sequences. The script structures this development through specific beats that allow both characters to demonstrate growth. The film's treatment of Carter's character development shows him learning respect for Lee's competence and cultural background. His initial dismissal of Lee as irrelevant gives way to appreciation for his skills and friendship. This character arc, while predictable, provides emotional satisfaction and models cross-cultural respect that the film implicitly advocates. The release strategy for Rush Hour in September positioned it away from summer blockbuster competition while capitalizing on fall audiences. The timing allowed the film to build word of mouth and maintain theatrical presence through the holiday season. The film's commercial performance benefited from this strategic positioning, demonstrating the importance of release timing in maximizing box office potential. The home video and cable television performance of Rush Hour extended its cultural reach beyond theatrical release. The film became a staple of cable programming in the early 2000s, introducing it to audiences who had missed its theatrical run. This sustained presence in popular culture contributed to its status as a defining film of its era. The critical conversation around Rush Hour in 1998 revealed the divisions between critics who evaluated films on their own terms and those who compared them to perceived standards of quality. The film's moderate critical scores reflect this division, with some critics appreciating its execution of formula and others demanding more innovation. The film's contribution to Jackie Chan's Hollywood career cannot be overstated. While Rumble in the Bronx had introduced American audiences to Chan's work, Rush Hour proved that he could anchor a major Hollywood production as a co-lead. This success opened doors for other Asian performers and demonstrated that international stars could transition to Hollywood without abandoning their established personas entirely. The soundtrack of Rush Hour captured the late 1990s moment in popular music, featuring artists like Drew Hill, Jay-Z, and other contemporary acts. The integration of popular music into the film's marketing and narrative helped position it as a culturally current production rather than a throwback to earlier action comedy conventions. The costuming and production design of Rush Hour reflect the late 1990s aesthetic while serving character development. Carter's wardrobe emphasizes his flashy, materialistic personality, while Lee's more restrained clothing reflects his disciplined character. These visual cues help establish character before dialogue or action sequences define them. The film's handling of the relationship between Carter and Tanya Johnson, played by Elizabeth Pena, provides romantic subplot elements that flesh out Carter's character beyond his professional persona. Their flirtation and eventual connection show Carter capable of genuine connection beyond his performative masculinity, adding dimension to a character who could have remained purely comedic. The representation of Hong Kong in the prologue of Rush Hour serves both narrative and thematic purposes. The final days of British colonial rule provide historical context, while allowing the film to establish Lee's credentials as a world-class detective. The sequence showcases Chan's action abilities while setting up the smuggling plot that connects to the Los Angeles kidnapping. The character of Griffin, or Hun Tao, represents a particular type of Hollywood villain, the cultured criminal whose sophistication masks cruelty. Tom Wilkinson's casting in this role brings genuine acting credibility to what could have been a generic antagonist, and his performance adds weight to the film's final confrontation. The film's approach to comedy balances physical humor, verbal wit, and situational irony. Chan's physical comedy, developed over decades in Hong Kong cinema, combines with Tucker's verbal comedy to create varied comedic textures. This balance allows the film to appeal to audiences with different comedic preferences while maintaining consistent tone. The action choreography in Rush Hour, while Americanized by Chan's standards, still demonstrates the principles that made Chan's Hong Kong work distinctive. The use of environment, the integration of comedy into fight sequences, and the emphasis on physicality rather than special effects all reflect Chan's influence on the production. The film's legacy includes its role in establishing the buddy cop genre for a new generation of viewers. While Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours defined the genre in the 1980s, Rush Hour updated it for the late 1990s with cross-cultural casting and contemporary humor. The film's success demonstrated the genre's continued viability when refreshed with new elements. The conclusion of Rush Hour emphasizes the friendship that has developed between Lee and Carter, with the outtakes showing their off-screen chemistry as much as the narrative resolution. This focus on relationship over plot resolution aligns with the film's central strength and leaves audiences with positive feelings that encourage repeat viewings and franchise development. The screenplay for Rush Hour underwent significant development between LaManna's original spec and the final shooting script, with writers Jim Cuff and later Ross LaManna himself refining the dialogue to suit the distinct voices of its two leads. The character of Detective James Carter was specifically tailored for Chris Tucker after his success in Money Talks, with the rapid-fire, high-pitched delivery becoming central to the film's comedic identity. Jackie Chan's involvement necessitated a significant rewrite of the Inspector Lee character to incorporate his trademark blend of physical comedy and earnest heroism. The writers studied the rhythms of Chan's English-language interviews to craft dialogue that would feel authentic to his speech patterns while remaining comprehensible to American audiences. The war scene, where both characters lip-sync to Edwin Starr's anti-war anthem, was reportedly added during production when the director recognized the need for a bonding moment between the two leads. This improvisational approach to development allowed the film to capitalize on the unexpected chemistry that emerged between Chan and Tucker during rehearsals. The script originally contained more overt martial arts sequences, but these were scaled back to accommodate Tucker's character arc and ensure balanced screen time. Producer Arthur Sarkisian, who had worked with Chan on previous Hollywood projects, served as a crucial cultural bridge between the Hong Kong and American production teams. The decision to set the prologue in Hong Kong during the 1997 handover was a deliberate storytelling choice that added geopolitical weight to what might otherwise have been a standard action introduction. Location scouting in Los Angeles prioritized neighborhoods that could visually represent the cultural collision central to the film's theme, from the neon-lit streets of Chinatown to the palm-lined boulevards of Century City. The The production design team created distinct visual palettes for Lee's world and Carter's world, with Lee's environments characterized by order and tradition while Carter's spaces reflected improvisation and modernity. The film's wardrobe department deliberately costumed Chan in darker, more conservative clothing to emphasize his character's seriousness, while Tucker's wardrobe featured brighter colors and louder patterns that matched his character's personality. The decision to include the end credits outtakes was a non-negotiable condition of Chan's participation, as this tradition had been central to his Hong Kong films for over a decade. New Line Cinema initially expressed hesitation about the outtakes, concerned that showing mistakes would undermine the film's polish, but ultimately agreed after seeing test audience reactions that overwhelmingly positive. The film's approach to action choreography represented a deliberate compromise between Chan's Hong Kong style and Hollywood conventions, with Chan personally overseeing all fight sequences while working within American safety protocols. The legendary stunt coordinator, who had collaborated with Chan on numerous Hong Kong productions, was brought to Los Angeles specifically to design sequences that would showcase Chan's abilities while remaining accessible to American audiences unfamiliar with his work. Each action sequence was storyboarded in advance, a departure from Chan's usual practice of improvising fights on set, to satisfy the requirements of the American studio system. The scene where Lee leaps from a double-decker bus to a traffic sign required months of planning and multiple safety riggings that Chan found cumbersome compared to his Hong Kong productions. The museum fight sequence, which serves as the film's climactic action set piece, was designed to incorporate the Chinese artifacts as both obstacles and weapons, connecting the action to the film's cultural heritage themes. Chan insisted on performing the atrium slide sequence himself despite studio concerns, completing the stunt after multiple rehearsals that tested the silk streamer's structural integrity. The fight choreography in the film's nightclub sequence deliberately limited Chan's movements to make them more legible to American audiences accustomed to wider shots and slower pacing. Chan's stunt team, many of whom had worked with him for decades, were brought to Los Angeles to ensure the action sequences maintained the precision and energy characteristic of his Hong Kong films. The integration of comedy into action sequences, a hallmark of Chan's style, was preserved in moments such as the fight where Lee uses Carter's obliviousness to defeat multiple opponents. The film's second unit director, who had extensive experience with American action cinema, worked alongside Chan's team to create a hybrid visual language that would satisfy both Eastern and Western audience expectations. Each punch and kick was carefully calibrated to maintain the PG-13 rating that the studio targeted, resulting in action that emphasized agility and invention over graphic violence. The use of practical effects rather than CGI for the majority of stunts was a condition Chan insisted upon, believing that digital effects would compromise the authenticity that distinguished his work. The film's stunt budget was significantly higher than typical for a production of its size, reflecting the insurance requirements and safety protocols necessary for Chan's style of action filmmaking. The finished action sequences received particular praise from critics who noted that even in this Americanized context, Chan's work remained superior to typical Hollywood action filmmaking of the period. The cultural reception of Rush Hour in Asian markets differed significantly from its American reception, with audiences bringing decades of familiarity with Chan's work to their viewing experience. In Hong Kong, where Chan was already a superstar, the film was marketed as his Hollywood triumph, emphasizing the scale and production values that an American budget could provide. Japanese audiences, who had followed Chan's career since the 1970s, responded strongly to the film's blend of Chan's physical comedy with American buddy cop conventions. South Korean distributors positioned the film as a cultural event, recognizing the significance of a major Hollywood production that placed an Asian actor in a starring role. The film's performance in China was complicated by the Hong Kong handover context and the portrayal of Chinese cultural artifacts being stolen by Western villains. Across Southeast Asian markets, Chan's participation guaranteed strong opening weekends, though some longtime fans expressed disappointment with the toned-down action compared to his Hong Kong films. The film's dialogue, which relied heavily on English-language wordplay and cultural references, required careful localization to maintain its comedic impact across different languages. Distributors in various territories created marketing materials that emphasized different aspects of the film, depending on local audience preferences, with some focusing on action while others highlighted the comedic pairing. The film's international gross of $103 million demonstrated the global appeal of Chan's star power, even in a film that represented a departure from his established style. Critics in Asia offered more nuanced assessments than their American counterparts, noting both the film's achievements in cross-cultural representation and its compromises in action choreography. The film's portrayal of a Chinese protagonist who is respected and valued by the narrative resonated with audiences who rarely saw such representation in Hollywood productions. Chan's performance was praised for maintaining his characteristic charm while adapting to an English-language context that could have diminished his comedic presence. The film's success in Asia helped justify the studio's investment in sequels, with each subsequent installment designed to appeal more deliberately to international markets. The distribution strategy for Rush Hour recognized Chan's unique position as a star who could open films in both Eastern and Western markets, a capability that few actors have ever possessed. The marketing campaign for Rush Hour was carefully calibrated to introduce Jackie Chan to mainstream American audiences while leveraging Chris Tucker's existing fanbase from Friday and Money Talks. The film's trailers emphasized the action sequences and comedic moments equally, presenting the film as a hybrid that would satisfy fans of both genres. The iconic poster image, featuring Chan and Tucker back-to-back against a Los Angeles backdrop, visually communicated the partnership at the film's center. New Line Cinema invested heavily in television advertising during primetime slots, recognizing that reaching broad audiences would be essential to the film's commercial success. The studio organized promotional appearances that paired Chan and Tucker together, allowing their off-screen chemistry to generate buzz in entertainment media. Chan's American publicity tour included interviews that explained his Hong Kong background to unfamiliar audiences, positioning him as an action legend whose work deserved attention. Tucker's promotional efforts emphasized his comedic credentials, while also highlighting the physical comedy aspects of the film that distinguished it from his previous work. The marketing materials deliberately downplayed the film's $33 million budget, instead emphasizing the scale and spectacle that audiences could expect from the production. Early screenings for critics and industry insiders generated word of mouth that emphasized the Chan-Tucker chemistry as the film's primary selling point. The studio's decision to release the film in September rather than during summer blockbuster season reflected confidence that strong word of mouth would carry the film through the fall. Merchandising partnerships with various brands extended the film's visibility beyond traditional advertising channels, with fast food promotions and retail tie-ins reaching audiences who might not follow entertainment media. The film's soundtrack was marketed as a standalone product, with the lead single receiving significant radio airplay in the months surrounding the film's release. Chan's willingness to participate in unconventional promotional activities, including appearances on programs that typically did not feature action stars, helped broaden the film's appeal. The marketing campaign's success was reflected in the film's $33 million opening weekend, which exceeded industry expectations for a September release. The sustained marketing push throughout the film's theatrical run contributed to its eventual $141 million domestic gross, demonstrating the effectiveness of a campaign that positioned Rush Hour as an event rather than merely another action comedy. The racial politics of Rush Hour have generated considerable scholarly attention in the decades since its release, with academics analyzing the film's representation of both Black and Asian characters within Hollywood conventions. The film's decision to pair a Black detective with an Asian detective represented a departure from the buddy cop genre's traditional reliance on white protagonists, though scholars note that both characters still conform to certain stereotypical expectations. Carter's characterization as loud, sexually aggressive, and street-smart draws on a tradition of Black comedic performance in Hollywood that dates back to the earliest days of cinema. Lee's characterization as reserved, martially skilled, and culturally authentic similarly draws on Asian stereotypes that have limited Asian American actors to specific types of roles. The film's humor frequently derives from Carter's assumption of cultural superiority, with his attempts to explain American culture to Lee becoming sources of comedy that reveal his own limitations. The scene where Carter attempts to communicate with Lee using exaggerated gestures and simplified English serves as a commentary on American assumptions about foreignness and intelligence. The film's treatment of Carter's character arc shows him learning to respect Lee's competence, a narrative that some scholars interpret as a model for cross-cultural understanding. The restaurant scene, where Carter reacts with exaggerated disgust to authentic Chinese cuisine, has been analyzed as a representation of American resistance to cultural difference that must be overcome. The film's portrayal of the FBI as incompetent and prejudiced creates a world where institutional racism must be overcome by individual cross-cultural partnership. The character of Soo Young, who appears only briefly, has been discussed as a representation of the Asian American experience of being caught between cultures. The film's treatment of the Chinese cultural artifacts in the climax has been analyzed as a commentary on cultural preservation and the ethics of museum collections. The decision to cast British actor Tom Wilkinson as the villain Griffin, rather than an Asian actor, has been interpreted as an effort to avoid casting Asian actors as villains, while also reflecting the film's post-colonial themes. The film's release in 1998, just as conversations about diversity in Hollywood were beginning to gain mainstream attention, positioned it within a transitional moment in American cinema. The film's enduring popularity has made it a subject of continuing analysis, as scholars trace the evolution of racial representation in Hollywood action cinema. The technical craft of Rush Hour involved contributions from a production team that brought together expertise from both Hollywood and Hong Kong cinema traditions. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg, who had previously worked on Terminator 2, Judgment Day, brought a polished visual sensibility that distinguished the film from Chan's grittier Hong Kong productions. The lighting design for action sequences emphasized visibility and clarity, ensuring that Chan's choreography remained legible even within the faster editing style of American action cinema. The film's editing suite included both American editors familiar with Hollywood pacing and Hong Kong editors who understood the rhythm of Chan's fight choreography. The sound design for Rush Hour emphasized the impact of each punch and kick, creating an auditory experience that compensated for the toned-down physical intensity compared to Chan's Hong Kong films. The musical score, composed by Lalo Schifrin, incorporated elements of both traditional Chinese music and American jazz, reflecting the film's cultural fusion themes. The film's color grading created distinct visual palettes for different locations, with Hong Kong scenes featuring cooler tones while Los Angeles scenes embraced warmer, more saturated colors. The production design for the museum climax required the creation of authentic-looking Chinese artifacts that could be used as props during the fight sequences without risking damage to genuine cultural objects. The art department researched Chinese imperial art extensively to ensure that the artifacts depicted in the film would be culturally accurate rather than generic representations. The costume design for Chan's character included subtle details, such as the cut of his suits, that reflected his character's Hong Kong origins while maintaining professional credibility. The film's hair and makeup departments worked to create looks that supported character differentiation, with Carter's polished appearance contrasting with the more natural styling of Lee. The visual effects team was used primarily for wire removal and background enhancement rather than creating digital stunts, preserving the practical authenticity that Chan demanded. The film's opening sequence, set in Hong Kong during the handover, required extensive visual effects to recreate the historical moment while maintaining production efficiency. The technical achievement of seamlessly blending Hong Kong action aesthetics with Hollywood production values became a model for subsequent cross-cultural productions. The film's visual language, balancing Eastern and Western conventions, contributed to its accessibility across diverse global markets. The performance dynamics between Chan and Tucker extended beyond the scripted material, with the two actors developing a rapport that shaped their characters' relationship. Chan's English proficiency, while adequate for the role, created opportunities for Tucker's character to misinterpret or dominate conversations, adding layers to their interactions. Tucker's improvisational style, honed through stand-up comedy and his previous film work, encouraged Chan to respond spontaneously rather than adhering strictly to scripted dialogue. The two actors reportedly spent significant time together outside of filming, developing the genuine friendship that would translate into on-screen chemistry. Chan's physical comedy, which often involved reacting to Tucker's verbal comedy, created a complementary dynamic where each performer enhanced the other's strengths. The scene where Carter attempts to teach Lee how to act like an American gangster required both actors to play against type, with Chan's character adopting Tucker's mannerisms with comic awkwardness. The film's rehearsal process emphasized building trust between the two leads, particularly for action sequences where Chan's choreography required Tucker's precise positioning. Tucker's willingness to participate in physical comedy, including moments where his character takes falls or suffers indignities, demonstrated his commitment to the partnership dynamic. Chan's experience working with comedic actors in Hong Kong prepared him to adapt his physical performance to complement Tucker's verbal style. The two actors' contrasting performance energies, Chan's physical precision against Tucker's verbal explosion, created a rhythmic tension that sustained interest throughout the film. The outtakes shown during the end credits revealed genuine moments of laughter and connection between the two actors, demonstrating that their on-screen chemistry reflected off-screen friendship. Chan's later admission that he initially didn't understand American humor underscores the genuine cultural negotiation happening between the two performers during production. The decision to allow both actors significant input into their characters' development resulted in performances that felt authentic rather than manufactured. The partnership between Chan and Tucker became the template for the franchise, with sequels designed to maximize opportunities for their unique dynamic. The film's representation of law enforcement institutions reflects a skepticism toward authority that was common in 1990s action cinema. The FBI agents in Rush Hour are portrayed as arrogant, incompetent, and racist, creating obstacles that the protagonists must overcome through individual initiative. The LAPD's willingness to sideline Carter, a detective with genuine skills, reflects institutional bias that the film implicitly critiques. The character of Carter's captain serves as an authority figure who respects Carter's abilities despite the institutional pressure to marginalize him. Consul Han's reliance on Lee rather than American law enforcement reflects the film's skepticism about whether established institutions can serve the needs of immigrant communities. The film's resolution, where Lee and Carter succeed where the FBI failed, reinforces a libertarian theme common in action cinema. Individual competence matters more than institutional authority. The portrayal of Secret Service agent Tanya Johnson as competent and fair provides a counterpoint to the FBI's institutional dysfunction, suggesting that some government agencies maintain integrity. The film's depiction of the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles represents an alternative authority structure that operates parallel to American institutions. The smuggling operation led by Griffin functions as a critique of how criminal enterprises exploit gaps between different legal jurisdictions. The film's climactic confrontation occurs in a museum, an institution traditionally associated with cultural authority, which the protagonists must defend from exploitation. The film's treatment of institutional authority reflects the broader cultural mood of the late 1990s, when skepticism toward government institutions was widespread. The character of Lee, operating outside American jurisdiction, represents the value of alternative perspectives in solving problems that institutional thinking cannot address. The film's resolution does not show the FBI learning from their mistakes or reforming their practices, suggesting a pessimistic view of institutional change. The celebration of individual agency over institutional authority aligns Rush Hour with the individualist ethos that has characterized American action cinema since the 1970s. The film's production timeline was remarkably compressed by Hollywood standards, with principal photography completed in approximately 3 months to accommodate Chan's schedule. The decision to film primarily on location in Los Angeles rather than on studio lots contributed to the film's authentic urban atmosphere, while creating logistical challenges for the production team. Chan's commitment to performing his own stunts required careful scheduling to allow adequate time for rehearsal and safety preparation before each action sequence. The film's second unit, responsible for establishing shots and vehicle sequences, worked simultaneously with the main unit to maintain the production schedule. The museum climax was filmed over 2 weeks, with the production team constructing elaborate sets within an actual Los Angeles museum location. The nightclub sequence required extensive coordination between the action choreography and the background performers to create a believable environment for the fight. Chan's stunt team arrived in Los Angeles weeks before principal photography began to rehearse action sequences and adapt to American safety protocols. The film's shooting schedule prioritized action sequences early in production, allowing Chan maximum time to recover from any injuries sustained during stunts. Tucker's availability was limited by his commitments to other projects, requiring the production to consolidate his scenes into concentrated periods of filming. The film's Hong Kong prologue was shot during a brief period when the production could secure the necessary permits for filming in the city's financial district. Post-production editing extended beyond the initial schedule as the creative team worked to balance action and comedy in a way that would appeal to both American and international audiences. The film's release date was pushed back slightly to allow additional time for the visual effects work required for the Hong Kong handover sequence. The compressed production timeline, while challenging, contributed to the energetic quality that critics noted in the final film. The successful completion of such an ambitious production on schedule demonstrated the professionalism of both the Hong Kong and American crew members who collaborated on the project. The legacy of Rush Hour in Jackie Chan's filmography is complicated by his own critical assessment of the film while acknowledging its importance to his career trajectory. Chan has spoken in interviews about his initial disappointment with the film's Americanized action style, feeling that his Hong Kong fans would see it as a compromise of his artistry. The actor has also acknowledged that Rush Hour provided him with financial security and Hollywood recognition that his earlier American films had failed to achieve. Chan's subsequent Hollywood productions, including Shanghai Noon and The Tuxedo, attempted to recapture the chemistry and success of Rush Hour with varying degrees of success. The actor's willingness to return for 2 sequels, despite his reservations about the first film, reflects his appreciation for the franchise's importance to his career. Chan's performances in the Rush Hour sequels incorporate more of his characteristic physical comedy, suggesting that he gained greater creative control as the franchise progressed. The actor has noted that his relationship with Tucker became more comfortable during the sequels, allowing him to relax into his performance in ways that the first film's production tensions prevented. Chan's American career following Rush Hour established him as one of the few Asian actors capable of leading Hollywood productions, opening doors for subsequent generations. The actor's work in China following his Hollywood success benefited from the international recognition that Rush Hour provided, allowing him to command greater budgets and creative freedom. Chan's production company, which has produced numerous Hong Kong and Chinese films, gained valuable experience from the Hollywood collaboration that informed their subsequent productions. The actor's willingness to discuss his disappointment with Rush Hour in interviews demonstrates his commitment to artistic honesty, while also acknowledging the film's commercial necessity. The documentary material about Chan's career consistently positions Rush Hour as a turning point, regardless of his personal feelings about the film's artistic merits. The franchise's enduring popularity ensures that Rush Hour will remain central to discussions of Chan's legacy, whether he considers it representative of his best work or not. The tension between artistic integrity and commercial success visible in Chan's relationship with the film reflects broader questions about how international artists navigate the Hollywood system. The film's approach to depicting Los Angeles as a multicultural metropolis serves both narrative and thematic purposes, presenting the city as a space where cultural collision is inevitable and potentially productive. The film's geography moves from the formal spaces of the Chinese consulate to the informal spaces of Carter's neighborhood, mapping the range of immigrant experiences in the city. Chinatown, depicted through its restaurants, storefronts, and community spaces, represents a world within the city that maintains its own rhythms and rules. Carter's familiarity with different Los Angeles neighborhoods positions him as a guide whose street-level knowledge complements Lee's official expertise. The film's depiction of the LAPD precinct reflects the demographic diversity of the city, while also showing the institutional barriers that persist despite this diversity. The museum setting for the climax, located in the city's cultural center, represents the institutional space where different cultures are displayed and contested. The film's use of location shooting rather than studio sets contributes to a sense of authenticity in its depiction of Los Angeles as a lived environment. The city's freeways, depicted in several sequences, represent the mobility that defines the Los Angeles experience, while also creating spaces where characters can interact outside institutional constraints. The contrast between the city's glamorous areas and its working-class neighborhoods reflects the economic diversity that characterizes Los Angeles as a whole. The film's portrayal of immigrant communities suggests that cultural identity persists even as individuals navigate the pressures of assimilation into American society. The character of Consul Han represents the diplomatic class whose presence in Los Angeles reflects the city's global economic importance. The film's Los Angeles is depicted as a city where the world's cultures converge, making it the appropriate setting for a story about cross-cultural partnership. The urban environment serves as more than backdrop, with the city's architecture and geography shaping the action sequences that unfold within it. The critical reassessment of Rush Hour in academic literature has explored the film's significance for understanding Hollywood's representation of race at the end of the 20th century. Scholars have noted that the film's release coincided with increasing scholarly attention to issues of representation in popular culture, making it a natural subject for analysis. The film's treatment of Asian masculinity has been examined as a departure from earlier Hollywood portrayals, while still maintaining certain stereotypical elements. The pairing of Chan and Tucker has been analyzed as a representation of solidarity between communities of color that challenges Hollywood's traditional racial hierarchies. The film's humor, which often relies on cultural misunderstanding, has been examined for how it both reinforces and subverts audience expectations about racial difference. The character of Carter has been discussed as an example of how Black comedic performance in Hollywood has been constrained by expectations that Black actors will play stereotypical roles. The film's representation of the Chinese immigrant experience through Consul Han and Su Young has been analyzed for its attention to the diversity within Asian American communities. The museum climax, where Lee protects Chinese artifacts from Western thieves, has been interpreted as a metaphor for cultural preservation and resistance to cultural appropriation. The film's treatment of the FBI as a racist institution has been examined as a critique of American institutional racism that was relatively rare in mainstream Hollywood productions. The scholarly attention to Rush Hour reflects broader interest in how popular culture can both perpetuate and challenge stereotypes about race and ethnicity. The film's commercial success, despite its controversial elements, has been analyzed as evidence of audience appetite for representations of interracial friendship and partnership. The franchise's longevity has allowed scholars to trace how the representation of race evolved across the three films, with later installments making more deliberate efforts to address criticism of the first film. The film's legacy in academic discourse continues to evolve as new generations of scholars bring fresh perspectives to its analysis. The impact of Rush Hour on Hollywood's approach to casting Asian actors in leading roles cannot be overstated, though the progress has been slower than many advocates hoped. The film's success demonstrated that American audiences would accept an Asian lead in a major Hollywood production, contradicting industry assumptions that had limited opportunities for Asian actors. Chan's subsequent career opened doors for actors such as Jet Li, Donnie Yen, and Michelle Yeoh, who found Hollywood opportunities following Rush Hour's success. The film's model of pairing an Asian actor with a non-Asian co-lead became a template for subsequent productions, seeking to maximize international box office potential. The industry's slow progress in developing projects with Asian leads without non-Asian co-stars reflects the continuing limitations of the model that Rush Hour established. The film's representation of an Asian character, who is both competent and respected by the narrative, provided a counterpoint to decades of Hollywood films that had marginalized Asian characters. Young Asian American actors who came of age after Rush Hour have cited the film as an influence that shaped their understanding of what was possible in Hollywood. The film's success contributed to New Line Cinema's willingness to invest in other projects with Asian leads, including the Shanghai Noon films that paired Chan with Owen Wilson. The industry's increased attention to Chinese and Asian markets in the 21st century owes a debt to the commercial success of Rush Hour and other films that demonstrated the value of Asian stars. The film's legacy for representation is complicated by its reliance on stereotypes, raising questions about whether visibility alone constitutes progress. The conversations about representation that Rush Hour sparked continue to influence how contemporary Hollywood approaches projects with Asian leads. The film's place in the history of Asian representation in Hollywood is secure, even as standards for what constitutes acceptable representation have evolved significantly since 1998, that the technical achievement of integrating Chan's stunt work with Hollywood production methods required innovations in both safety protocols and cinematographic technique. American stunt coordinators worked alongside Chan's Hong Kong team to develop hybrid safety procedures that satisfied union requirements, while allowing Chan the freedom to perform his characteristic stunts. The use of wider lenses and longer takes in action sequences, a departure from typical American practice, was negotiated to accommodate Chan's preference for showing the full scope of his physical performance. The film's insurance costs were substantially higher than typical for a production of its budget, reflecting the risks associated with Chan's commitment to performing his own stunts. The production employed multiple safety rigs that had to be carefully hidden from the camera while still providing protection for Chan during his most dangerous sequences. The atrium slide sequence required engineers to calculate the tensile strength of the silk streamer and Chan's weight to ensure the stunt could be performed safely. The double-decker bus sequence was filmed on a closed section of Los Angeles freeway, requiring coordination with city authorities and extensive safety preparations for Chan's jump. The museum fight sequence required the installation of protective padding beneath the visible surfaces, allowing Chan and his opponents to perform falls without risking serious injury. The film's stunt performers, including members of Chan's team, underwent extensive safety training to ensure they could perform their roles without compromising the quality of the action. The production's commitment to practical effects meant that each stunt had to be performed successfully on camera, requiring patience and repeated rehearsals before each take. The collaboration between American and Hong Kong stunt professionals established working relationships that would continue on subsequent films and across the industry. The safety innovations developed for Rush Hour influenced how subsequent action films approached stunt work, particularly those involving international talent. The film's action sequences remain notable for their integration of Chan's signature style within the framework of American safety requirements. The film's dialogue contains numerous examples of the cultural negotiation that defines the Lee-Carter relationship, with language serving as both barrier and bridge between the characters. Carter's frequent use of African-American vernacular English creates linguistic distance that Lee must navigate while also establishing Carter's cultural identity. Lee's formal English, learned through diplomatic and professional contexts, contrasts with Carter's informal speech, reflecting their different relationships to American society. The film's humor often derives from Carter's assumption that Lee's limited English indicates limited intelligence, a presumption that the narrative consistently undermines. The scene where Lee reveals his understanding of English after allowing Carter to believe otherwise represents a moment of narrative satisfaction that rewards attentive viewers. The film's treatment of translation, both literal and cultural, suggests that understanding requires more than language proficiency. It requires genuine openness to difference. Carter's attempts to teach Lee American expressions reflect his assumption that assimilation should be one-directional, an assumption the film complicates. The film's use of Mandarin dialogue in scenes between Lee and other Chinese characters creates moments of linguistic privacy that Carter cannot access, establishing the limits of his perspective. The war scene, where both characters sing together, represents a moment where music transcends the linguistic barriers that have separated them. The film's closing scenes show Carter attempting to use Mandarin phrases, demonstrating his growth toward linguistic and cultural accommodation. The script's careful attention to language reflects the writer's understanding that communication, both successful and failed, would be central to the film's comedy and drama. The linguistic dynamic between the characters has been analyzed by scholars as a representation of how power operates through language in cross-cultural encounters. The film's contribution to the buddy cop genre includes innovations in how cultural difference functions as both obstacle and opportunity within the formula. The genre, established by films like Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours, typically paired characters whose differences were primarily temperamental rather than cultural. Rush Hour expanded the genre's possibilities by showing how genuine cultural difference could create conflicts that required more than simple compromise to resolve. The film's treatment of Lee's martial arts skills as a resource rather than a novelty distinguished it from earlier films that had treated Asian martial arts as exotic spectacle. The film's success demonstrated that buddy cop films could succeed without a white protagonist, a formula that had dominated the genre since its inception. The film's influence can be seen in subsequent buddy cop productions that have paired actors from different cultural backgrounds, including Shanghai Noon and the Lethal Weapon television adaptation. The genre's evolution in the 21st century has included increased attention to authentic cultural representation, a development that Rush Hour helped initiate. The film's balance of action and comedy established a template that subsequent buddy cop films have followed, with the relationship between leads prioritized over plot complexity. The film's international success demonstrated that buddy cop films with cross-cultural casts could appeal to global audiences, expanding the genre's commercial potential. The film's place in buddy cop genre history is secured by its commercial success and its influence on subsequent productions, even as the genre itself has declined in popularity. The film's willingness to critique institutional racism within the buddy cop format distinguished it from earlier entries that had treated social issues more superficially. The relationship between Lee and Carter has been cited by filmmakers as a model for creating cross-cultural partnerships that feel authentic rather than manufactured. The genre's future may depend on the continued willingness of studios to invest in films that, like Rush Hour, prioritize chemistry and character over spectacle and special effects. The film's enduring popularity on home video and streaming platforms has introduced it to generations of viewers who did not experience its theatrical release. The film's presence on cable television throughout the 2000s made it a staple of casual viewing, with audiences discovering the film through repeated broadcasts. The availability of Rush Hour on streaming platforms has allowed younger viewers to discover the film in an era when its racial humor is subject to more critical scrutiny. The film's outtakes, which were novel for American audiences in 1998, have become a signature element that distinguishes the franchise in the home video market. The film's quotable dialogue has entered popular culture, with lines from the film referenced in other media and everyday conversation. The film's popularity has sustained discussions of a fourth installment for nearly 2 decades, with Chon and Tucker periodically expressing interest in returning to their roles. The film's place in popular culture has been cemented by its status as a comfort watch, with audiences returning to the film for its reliable combination of action and comedy. The film's availability in multiple formats, from DVD to 4K Blu-ray, reflects the studio's recognition of its enduring commercial value. The film's streaming performance has been consistently strong, with viewership increasing during periods when news of potential sequels or reunions generates renewed interest. The film's appeal to audiences who were not yet born when it was released demonstrates the timelessness of its central dynamic, even as its cultural references have dated. The film's legacy in home video includes its role in establishing the outtakes tradition as a standard feature for action comedy films. The continued discovery of Rush Hour by new audiences ensures that its analysis and discussion will persist for years to come. The production design of Rush Hour extended beyond the creation of physical spaces to encompass the subtle cultural signifiers that would communicate character and conflict to international audiences without relying solely on dialogue. The art department researched both Hong Kong and Los Angeles police procedures to ensure that the details of Lee and Carter's professional environments would ring true to viewers familiar with either context. The decision to house the Chinese consulate within a building that blended traditional Chinese architectural elements with contemporary Los Angeles design reflected the film's central theme of cultural negotiation. The selection of specific artworks and decorative objects for Consul Han's office was guided by the need to convey diplomatic authority, while also suggesting the personal history that connected Han to Lee. The contrast between the orderly, almost austere spaces associated with Lee and the cluttered, personality-driven spaces of Carter's apartment visually reinforced the character differences established through performance and dialogue. The museum setting for the climax was chosen not only for its visual grandeur, but also for the symbolic resonance of protecting cultural artifacts within an institution dedicated to their preservation. The production team worked with cultural consultants to ensure that the Chinese artifacts depicted in the museum sequence would be historically accurate rather than generic representations of Asian art. The design of Huntao's warehouse headquarters incorporated elements of industrial decay and illicit wealth, creating an environment that visually communicated the villain's criminal enterprise. The film's color palette shifted subtly throughout the narrative, with cooler tones dominating the Hong Kong prologue and warmer tones emerging as Lee and Carter's partnership developed. The lighting design for action sequences emphasized the physicality of Chan's performance, while also creating visual interest through the strategic use of shadows and highlights. The art department's attention to period detail, from the technology used by FBI agents to the street-level signage of Chinatown, grounded the film in its late 1990s moment while allowing its themes to remain accessible. The production's use of practical locations rather than studio sets contributed to the film's authenticity, while also creating logistical challenges that required innovative solutions from the design team. The integration of visual elements that would appeal to both American and international audiences reflected the production's awareness of the film's global commercial ambitions. The material choices for set construction and decoration, from the finish of Consul Han's desk to the upholstery of Carter's car, were calibrated to support the film's tonal balance between comedy and action. The cumulative effect of these design decisions created a world where cultural difference was visible in every frame while remaining secondary to the human relationships at the film's center. The sound design of Rush Hour represented a crucial element in bridging the gap between Chan's Hong Kong action aesthetic and Hollywood production expectations. The film's sound team recorded extensive Foley work to capture the specific textures of Chan's movements, ensuring that each punch, kick, and fall would carry the visceral impact expected by audiences familiar with his work. The decision to emphasize diegetic sound during action sequences, the sounds of bodies impacting surfaces, objects breaking, and environmental elements being utilized, grounded the fantastical elements of the choreography in physical reality. The film's ambient soundscapes differentiated between the controlled environment of the Chinese consulate, the chaotic energy of Carter's neighborhood, and the sterile spaces of FBI operations. The use of directional audio during dialogue scenes reinforced the linguistic barriers between characters, with Lee's quieter, more measured speech contrasted against Carter's louder, more expansive vocal presence. The sound team collaborated with Chan to identify the specific sonic signatures of his Hong Kong films. The crisp impact sounds, the environmental integration, the rhythm of movement, and adapted them for the American soundscape. The film's use of silence during key dramatic moments, particularly in scenes where Lee processes emotional information or makes decisions, created space for performance that dialogue alone could not achieve. The mixing process carefully balanced the action soundtrack, musical score, and environmental sounds to ensure that the comedic dialogue would remain audible during sequences where multiple elements competed for attention. The film's sound effects library was expanded specifically to accommodate Chan's unique physical vocabulary, with new recordings made of the specific materials and surfaces used in his stunts. The integration of Lalo Schifrin's score with the film's diegetic sound required careful calibration to ensure that neither element overwhelmed the other during key sequences. The sound design for the Hong Kong prologue established an auditory vocabulary that would be echoed throughout the film, creating continuity across the geographic and temporal shifts of the narrative. The film's sonic palette drew on both Hong Kong action cinema traditions and Hollywood orchestral scoring, reflecting the production's hybrid nature. The careful attention to sound extended to the outtakes shown during the credits, where the sounds of laughter and production mishaps provided a counterpoint to the polished sound of the film proper. The technical achievement of Rush Hour's sound design contributed significantly to the film's accessibility across language barriers, with action and emotion communicated through audio as effectively as through dialogue. The casting process for Rush Hour involved decisions that would fundamentally shape the film's identity, with the selection of supporting players proving as crucial as the recruitment of its stars. The decision to cast British actor Tom Wilkinson as the villain Griffin represented a deliberate choice to avoid the typecasting that might have resulted from casting an Asian actor in the role. Wilkinson's reputation as a serious dramatic actor brought unexpected gravitas to the role, elevating what could have been a generic antagonist into a character with genuine presence. The casting of Tsi Ma as Consul Han drew on the actor's extensive experience playing characters who navigate between Asian and American cultures, a theme central to the film's concerns. Ken Leung's portrayal of Sang required an actor who could match Chan's physical intensity while also conveying the menace necessary to serve as the film's primary physical antagonist. Elizabeth Pena's casting as Secret Service agent Tanya Johnson provided a counterpoint to the male-dominated action genre, bringing warmth and competence to a role that could have been purely functional. The filmmakers sought actors who could hold their own against Chan and Tucker's dominant screen presences, recognizing that the supporting cast would need to provide strong foundations for the leads to play against. The decision to cast Julia Su, a child actor with martial arts training, as Su Young allowed the character to participate credibly in the film's action elements while maintaining her vulnerability. The casting of Philip Baker Hall as Captain Deal added another layer of gravitas to the film, with the veteran character actor bringing authority and weariness to the role of Carter's supervisor. The film's villainous henchmen were cast primarily from actors with martial arts backgrounds, ensuring that Chan's action sequences would have credible opponents capable of the required choreography. The casting process for smaller roles prioritized actors who could improvise effectively, recognizing that Tucker's performance style would create opportunities for unscripted moments. The ensemble casting reflected the film's multicultural ambitions, with actors from various backgrounds populating the Los Angeles that Lee and Carter navigate. The chemistry between the supporting cast members and the leads was carefully evaluated during auditions, with the filmmakers seeking performers who could enhance rather than distract from the central pairing. The casting of Chan's Hong Kong stunt team members in small roles and background positions maintained continuity with his previous work while introducing American audiences to the faces associated with his filmography. The cumulative effect of these casting decisions created a world that felt inhabited and authentic, supporting the leads' performances while contributing independent value to the film. The marketing and promotional strategy for Rush Hour extended beyond traditional advertising to encompass a comprehensive campaign designed to introduce Jackie Chan to American audiences. New Line Cinema invested in educational marketing materials that explained Chan's Hong Kong career to journalists and critics who might not be familiar with his work. The studio arranged for Chan to appear on high-profile talk shows where his charm and physical comedy could be showcased in ways that translated across cultural boundaries. The film's trailers were carefully edited to balance Chan's action sequences with Tucker's comedic moments, ensuring that the film would appeal to audiences who might be drawn to either element. The promotional tour paired Chan and Tucker for interviews where their off-screen chemistry could generate enthusiasm that would translate into box office interest. The studio secured partnerships with brands that appealed to diverse demographics, recognizing that the film's cross-cultural appeal would require a multifaceted marketing approach. The film's poster campaign underwent multiple iterations before settling on the iconic image of Chan and Tucker back-to-back against a Los Angeles skyline. Early screenings for critics and industry influencers were strategically scheduled to generate positive word of mouth that could counteract any skepticism about the film's formulaic nature. The marketing team emphasized the film's Hong Kong handover prologue in materials targeting international audiences, recognizing the geopolitical hook's potential to generate interest. The studio invested in outdoor advertising in urban areas with diverse populations, positioning the film as an event for communities that rarely saw themselves represented in Hollywood blockbusters. The film's soundtrack was promoted alongside the film itself, with music videos incorporating footage that extended the film's promotional reach. The marketing campaign's success in positioning Rush Hour as an event rather than merely another action comedy contributed significantly to its opening weekend performance. The studio's willingness to invest in Chan's American introduction paid dividends not only for this film, but for his subsequent Hollywood career. The promotional strategy recognized that the film's success depended on audiences accepting the central pairing, and every element of the campaign was designed to sell the Chan-Tucker partnership above all else. The cinematographic approach of Rush Hour represented a deliberate synthesis of Hong Kong and Hollywood visual languages, with DP Adam Greenberg adapting his style to accommodate Chan's action requirements. The decision to use wider lenses and deeper focus for action sequences allowed Chan's choreography to be captured in its entirety, preserving the physical comedy and spatial relationships that characterized his Hong Kong work. The camera placement during fight scenes prioritized visibility over stylization, ensuring that audiences could follow the geography of each encounter without confusion. The film's use of handheld camera during dialogue scenes created an immediacy that complemented Tucker's energetic performance style while maintaining the polish expected of Hollywood productions. The lighting design for Chan's scenes emphasized his physical presence, with strategic rim lighting separating him from backgrounds during action sequences. The cinematography team worked closely with Chan's stunt coordinators to identify camera positions that would maximize the impact of specific stunts while maintaining safety protocols. The film's visual language distinguished between the controlled environments of official spaces and the chaotic energy of the streets through camera movement and framing choices. The Hong Kong prologue was shot with a slightly desaturated color palette that visually distinguished it from the warmer tones of the Los Angeles sequences. The use of crane shots and wide establishing shots oriented audiences within the film's geography while also showcasing the production's scale. The cinematography of the nightclub sequence required careful coordination between camera movement, lighting design, and action choreography to create a sequence that felt both chaotic and coherent. The museum climax was lit to emphasize the preciousness of the artifacts being protected while also creating dramatic shadows that enhanced the action choreography. The film's coverage of dialogue scenes employed a classic Hollywood approach, with master shots followed by coverage that allowed editors to shape performances in post-production. The cinematographic style evolved across the film's runtime, with early scenes employing more formal compositions that gradually loosened as Lee and Carter's partnership developed. The visual continuity between the Hong Kong and Los Angeles sequences was maintained through consistent lens choices and color grading approaches that created a unified visual identity. The post-production process for Rush Hour involved significant editorial decisions about how to balance the film's action and comedy elements for maximum audience appeal. The editing team, working with both American and Hong Kong footage, had to create a rhythm that would satisfy fans of both cinematic traditions. The decision to prioritize character moments over action sequences in the film's first act established the relationship between Lee and Carter before asking audiences to invest in their physical conflicts. The editors worked closely with Chan to ensure that action sequences were cut in ways that preserved the integrity of his choreography while maintaining the pace expected by American audiences. The film's comedic timing was refined through test screenings that identified which moments landed most effectively with diverse audiences. The decision to include the outtakes during the end credits was made during post-production after editors recognized the charm of the footage captured between takes. The film's pacing was calibrated to alternate between action sequences, comedic scenes, and dramatic moments in patterns that maintained audience engagement throughout the runtime. The editorial team created multiple versions of key sequences to test different approaches to balancing the film's various tonal elements. The film's title sequence, which introduced Chan and Tucker's names over stylized imagery, was designed to establish the film's tone before any narrative content was presented. The editors worked with the sound team to ensure that comedic beats were supported by appropriate audio cues, enhancing the timing of both verbal and physical humor. The film's transitions between scenes were designed to maintain momentum, while also providing audiences with the spatial and temporal orientation necessary to follow the narrative. The editorial process identified opportunities to enhance character development through reaction shots and moments of silence that the script had not explicitly indicated. The film's final cut represented a compromise between Chan's preference for longer action takes and the studio's desire for faster pacing that would appeal to broader audiences. The post-production team's success in creating a film that satisfied both commercial requirements and artistic ambitions contributed significantly to Rush Hour's enduring popularity. The film's exploration of masculinity operates through the contrast between Lee's disciplined, protective masculinity and Carter's performative, competitive masculinity. Lee's character embodies a masculinity rooted in competence, responsibility, and the capacity for violence that is restrained until necessary. Carter's initial presentation of masculinity emphasizes sexual conquest, verbal dominance, and material display as markers of masculine success. The film traces Carter's evolution from a masculinity defined by external validation to one more closely aligned with Lee's values of competence and responsibility. The film's action sequences consistently demonstrate that Lee's quiet competence is more effective than Carter's loud posturing, creating a hierarchy of masculine values. The relationship between the two characters requires Carter to learn vulnerability and humility, traditionally feminized qualities that the film presents as essential to genuine partnership. Lee's protection of Soo Young represents a masculinity focused on care and responsibility, challenging stereotypes about martial masculinity being primarily aggressive. Carter's eventual willingness to risk himself for Lee and Soo Young represents his adoption of protective masculinity as a value. The film's villains embody distorted versions of masculinity, with Griffin representing the cultured predator and Sang representing mindless aggression. The film's resolution sees both characters achieving a more balanced masculinity that integrates the best aspects of their initial orientations. The absence of romantic relationships for Lee in the film allows his character to be defined primarily through professional competence and friendship rather than sexual conquest. Carter's romantic interest in Tanya Johnson requires him to move beyond performative masculinity toward genuine connection, representing another dimension of his character development. The film's treatment of masculinity reflects broader cultural conversations about gender roles that were ongoing in the late 1990s. The friendship between Lee and Carter represents a model of male relationship that prioritizes mutual respect and emotional honesty over competition and posturing. The film's representation of childhood through the character of Soo Young departs from typical depictions of kidnapped children in action cinema. Soo Young is introduced as a martial arts student who has been practicing techniques that would enable her to defend herself, establishing her as an active participant in her own rescue rather than a passive victim. The relationship between Lee and Soo Young is established through their shared training, suggesting a bond based on mutual respect and shared discipline rather than mere familial obligation. The film's narrative structure allows Soo Young to demonstrate agency even while captive, with moments of resistance that maintain her characterization as a capable young person. The decision to cast an actor with martial arts training allowed the character to participate credibly in the film's physical vocabulary. The film's treatment of Soo Young's kidnapping emphasizes the trauma of separation from family, while also suggesting her resilience through her resistance to her captors. The scenes of Lee searching for Soo Young are motivated by his responsibility as her teacher as much as by his obligation to her father, complicating the typical rescue narrative. The film's climax includes a moment where Soo Young uses her training to assist in her own rescue, rewarding the audience's investment in her earlier characterization. The relationship between Soo Young and her father provides emotional stakes that ground the film's action sequences in genuine human concern. The film's avoidance of scenes depicting Soo Young in distress focuses audience attention on the efforts of her rescuers rather than on her suffering. The character's limited screen time is used efficiently, with each appearance advancing either her characterization or the narrative. The film's treatment of childhood resists the sentimentality that often characterizes kidnapped child narratives in action cinema. The reunion between Soo Young and her father provides emotional closure, while also celebrating Lee's success in fulfilling his responsibility. The film's legacy includes its representation of a child character who is both vulnerable and capable, establishing expectations for similar characters in subsequent action films.